He was a billionaire, a widower, and a father, grieving in silence, hunted by women who wanted his fortune, not his heart. So, David Walker did the unthinkable. He faked his own financial ruin to uncover who truly cared. One by one, the women around him failed his test, each revealing their true motives when the wealth vanished. But when he hit rock bottom, it was not a lover who showed up. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Walker estate like liquid gold. Outside, birds chirped across the sprawling gardens that bloomed with perfectly manicured roses. Inside, the mansion stood quiet, eerily so, as though it too had learned to mourn in silence. David Walker sat alone at the edge of his son's bed, watching the small boy, Adrian, sleep. Beside the bed, a faded photograph showed David and Clara on their wedding day. Her smile still managed to steal his breath, even in absence. She had died 4 years ago, giving her life to bring Adrian into the world, a trade David had never fully forgiven. Since then, David had built a fortress around his grief, making his mansion a mausoleum of memories. Clara's paintings, her piano, her clothes all remained, a shrine he could not dismantle. The public knew him as a powerful force, the ruthless Ice King of Walker Properties. Yet, none saw him in the quiet nights, clutching Clara's nightgown, whispering her name. None knew his ache for the woman who should be watching Adrian play alongside him. Time had passed, and the world tried to pull him forward. Galas, charity events, business deals brought a parade of beautiful, charming, relentless women. They flirted, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes, their intentions clear. They wanted the Walker name, the fortune, the legacy. None truly wanted him. David, with polite indifference, had deflected them all. Now, a quiet guilt stirred within him. Adrian was growing up without a mother. David saw it in his son's innocent questions, in the way Adrian clung to his nanny, Linda, like a lifeline, in his wide, observant eyes at mothers in the park. David had promised himself never to replace Clara, believing it a betrayal. But Adrian's needs were louder than his own pain. He needed to try, not for himself, but for his son. How could he trust again? The answer emerged over weeks, a plan born of cynicism and desperation. He would test them. The women hovering at the edges of his life. He would strip away everything: the money, the power, the allure, by faking his own financial downfall. He would orchestrate a crisis that would shake up the world's perception of him, then watch. Would they still call, still come around? Would they care about the man behind the mansion? If one passed, she might be the one. If none did, David would know for certain. He rose from Adrian's bedside, kissed his forehead, and walked toward the door. The weight of his decision settled on his chest, fearing not the lie, but the truth it might reveal. His hand hesitated on the doorknob. Adrian stirred. "Daddy," the small voice called out. David turned. "Yes, buddy." Adrian rubbed his eyes. "Will Mommy come back someday?" The words cut deep. David knelt, tucked his son in. "No, sweetheart," he said softly, "but maybe someone else can love you just as much someday." Adrian nodded sleepily. David stood, heart heavy, and whispered to the dark, "Let us see who stays when there is nothing left to take." The first domino was tipped. The illusion of wealth was easy to build, but David Walker was about to learn how satisfying it was to tear it all down. The morning after he had made the decision, David began making the necessary calls, confidential, strategic, and surgical. His financial advisor, Andrew Hale, had been with him since the earliest days of Walker Properties. Andrew was also one of the few people David trusted implicitly. "This is insane," Andrew muttered, staring across David's mahogany desk at the mock financial statements. "You want a fake insolvency? Tank your public image?" "I want a fake vulnerability," David replied, fingers steepled, voice calm. "There is a difference," Andrew exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "There are easier ways to meet women, like a dating application." "I am not looking to meet women," David said. "I am trying to find one." Andrew said nothing, but eventually he nodded. "All right then, we do this, right? Press releases, leaks, frozen accounts, a lawsuit from a fake rival developer, layoffs, cutbacks, the works." Within 48 hours, the media machine began to churn. Reports suggested Walker Properties was facing collapse. A fake international project had supposedly defaulted. A staged lawsuit by a disgruntled partner named Leon Miller was filed in the public court database, accusing David of gross mismanagement. His company's digital pages went silent, reflecting the dire situation. The household staff received instructions. The housekeeper was told she had been let go, as were the groundskeepers and the rest of the domestic team, except for Linda, Adrian's nanny. The cars remained in the garage, but the valet was told not to bring them out. Security was dialed back to minimal. David's personal financial card stopped working in public, creating minor, staged embarrassments. Everything was set. All that was left was to wait. Serena Monroe had entered his life 2 months earlier, a vision in red silk and weaponized confidence. They met at a charity auction, a glitzy affair where champagne flowed and smiles were sharp. Serena, beautiful with dark waves and warm eyes, had spent the evening laughing and subtly brushing David's arm. Her directness had caught his attention. "You are too handsome to be hiding behind a reputation," she had purred. "I thought I was hiding behind my bank account," he replied. "That too." Their encounters had been few, David always maintaining a careful distance, though Serena's desire for more was evident. Now she was his first test. When bankruptcy headlines broke, David waited. Like clockwork, her text arrived the next evening. "Is everything okay? Just saw the news. Call me." He did not call. Instead, he replied, "It is bad. I will explain soon." 2 days passed in silence. On the third day, he messaged again. "I am sorry for going quiet. Have been dealing with a lot. Lost half my staff this week. House is too quiet." Her reply came instantly. "I totally get it. You probably need time to think. Just know I am here if you need someone." Encouraged by the neutral tone, David invited her for dinner. He had dismissed the chef, dimmed the lights, and dressed in sweatpants and a plain hoodie, letting his stubble grow. Serena's expression flickered as she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the quiet entryway, the absence of staff, the unopened wine bottle. "You look different," she observed. "Long week," he offered. Dinner was plain takeout. David played his part, speaking in half sentences, his eyes tired. He spoke of selling the property, of vanished friends, of loyalty not being what he thought. Serena nodded, sipping her wine, her phone buzzing with messages she answered with a smirk. "So," she asked, "what happens now?" "I am not sure. I guess I figure out who really wants to be in my life, even if there is nothing left." Her eyes lingered too long, then she smiled sympathetically. "You will bounce back. A man like you will always land on your feet." That was the moment David knew. She was not staying for the fall, only watching his rise. He walked her to the door. She turned, kissing his cheek. "Let me know if you want to talk. I just might be in Milan next week, though." "Photo shoot. Thanks, Serena. Travel safe." The door clicked shut. David watched moonlight spill across the floor. She never called again. Within a week, she was in photographs with Marcus Delroy, a wealthy venture capitalist. Her caption, "The view is better when you are with someone who knows where he is going." David closed the application, tossing his phone onto the table. Strike one. The game had only just begun. The storm had passed, but the clouds lingered. David Walker had learned that loyalty could vanish faster than smoke. Serena Monroe's exit had proven that. Her departure had been silent, clinical, uncomplicated. Natalyia Voss, however, was another breed entirely. She branded her intentions, loud and impossible to ignore. Natalyia had approached him at a technology summit 2 months prior. She wore black leather and red lipstick, a walking headline with the gaze of a lioness mid-hunt. David instantly clocked her as an influencer turned entrepreneur, her brand built around curated vulnerability. Her voice, breathy and self-aware, had said, "Oh my goodness, you are not as intimidating in person." "I think I like that." David offered a polite smile. Natalyia was not after romance. She was after relevance, a currency David had in abundance until headlines declared him bankrupt. When the news of his financial ruin broke, Natalyia wasted no time. The day after the story leaked, she created a video. A black and white filter, faux cryptic piano music, and her face partially in frame as she spoke softly. "Sometimes life humbles even the strongest among us. Let us never forget to offer grace when people fall, especially those who have carried the weight of a kingdom." She did not mention his name. She did not have to. 2 days later, David received her message. "I am so sorry. I heard. If you ever want to just talk, no cameras, no public, just coffee, my treat. He waited one day before replying, could use some company. She arrived at the cafe in athleisure and oversized sunglasses, looking both incognito and desperate for recognition. Instead of hugging him, she took a photograph of herself, citing her tragically attractive appearance. Her phone sat carefully angled like a centerpiece. I hate that this happened to you, she said, her voice velvet over ice. You are like untouchable. And then poof, the world wants to watch you bleed. David played his part, giving her enough pain to feed on. Lost more than money, he said, eyes lowered. People I thought were friends vanished overnight. Feels like everyone was just here for the ride. Natalyia's eyes glittered. Well, she said, sipping her tea, I am not going anywhere, not while your story is still being written. Her interest was in his narrative, and she was not done. Over the next week, David watched her turn his downfall into a platform for her own brand. She launched a podcast, The Rise After the Fall, speaking of resilience and loyalty. Her second episode featured a veiled anecdote. There is someone in my life who is going through a lot, a father, a man, a king, really. But I have not left him, because that is what love looks like. Loyalty, presence. Her listeners speculated. She never corrected them. David invited her over, wanting to see her act alone. She arrived with her assistant, filming behind-the-scenes content. Even bankrupt, it is a palace, she exclaimed, drifting around the living room, posing as if she belonged. When they sat, she pulled out a folder. I have been thinking, she began, shifting into business mode. This might be a good time to pivot. You have name recognition, a compelling story. If we do a documentary series about your comeback, a certain streaming service would be crazy not to pick it up. He blinked. You want to make a show about my life? She leaned forward, eyes gleaming. People consume this stuff. Redemption arcs, widowed father, fallen tycoon. We show the real you. And when you bounce back, it is epic. David leaned back. I am not sure I am ready to be a story, he said finally. Her smile faltered. Think about it. I already wrote a pitch deck. He had his answer. He canceled their upcoming brunch and did not answer her calls. 3 days later, she spoke publicly, crying softly as she clutched a mug. Trust no one. People will use you. They will take your ideas, your heart, and then they will discard you like you never existed. David deleted her number. Strike two. She had come for a comeback story, not his heart. The evening air over the city skyline had a brittle chill to it, the kind that stirred unease beneath the skin. David stood by the window of his study, hands in his pockets, watching the lights blink across the buildings. It was strange. He used to find comfort in this view, the height, the control, the sense of dominion. But now, with the third test looming, the city felt like a stage, and he was growing tired of the play. 2 had already failed. Serena's loyalty evaporated with wealth. Natalyia leveraged his ruin as an aesthetic. Now Clare Wilson was next. Unlike the others, Clare was no socialite. She was power-wrapped in silk and self-control. They had met through mutual business acquaintances. Clare, in her early 30s, had been representing a high-profile divorce, selling off real estate assets, and David had been the buyer. She was sharp, poised, with eyes that flicked over contracts like a hawk tracking prey. She did not flirt with charm, she negotiated with it. Elegant, with no wasted movement, she wore tailored suits and carried leather-bound notebooks. She was the kind of woman people mistook for cold until she smiled, a smile that made men underestimate her. David never had, and that was why he wanted to see what was underneath it. News of his financial ruin had not rattled Clare, at least not openly. Unlike Serena and Natalyia, she did not send dramatic messages or perform social sympathy. Instead, she emailed, "Saw the news. You will survive. Let me know if you need legal help. No frills, no pity, just an offer." A few days later, she invited him to dinner at a members-only lounge in Manhattan, private, expensive, and discreet. Exactly her style. David showed up in a worn trench coat, dress shirt unbuttoned, his eyes more tired than usual. She was already seated, sipping whiskey, legs crossed with precision. "You look like you have been dragged backwards through litigation," she said, her eyes scanning him. "Which I suppose you have." He forced a smile. "Close enough." Clare gestured to the seat opposite. "Sit, drink. We have strategy to discuss." He did not argue. For the next hour, Claire mapped out the entire financial collapse as if it were a chess game. She referenced loopholes, asset protection tactics, and offshore avenues to secure what he had left. Then she shifted. "I assume you have kept something aside," she said, sipping her drink without looking at him. "I have not," David lied. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Please, you do not strike me as naive." David leaned back, letting his silence answer. She crossed her legs the other way, her expression unreadable. "If you truly have nothing," she said finally, "then you are going to need someone with leverage. Someone with clean books, someone who can help you rebuild from zero. And you are volunteering?" he asked. Claire smiled, not kindly, but like a woman offering to buy a failing company for its brand potential. "I am offering partnership, the kind that benefits both of us. A merger, a marriage," she said calmly. "In appearance, at least. We combine assets. I bring legal protection and stability. You bring visibility and public appeal. We write the narrative of reinvention, and when you are back on your feet, we reassess." David did not answer right away. He watched her. There was no warmth in her proposal, no concern. Just business, cold, clean, strategic. "Would you do this if I were a middle manager with a 2-bedroom apartment and no public appeal?" he asked quietly. Claire did not blink. "You are not." Her honesty was admirable, brutal, but revealing. He excused himself early that night. 2 days later, he invited her to his home. He let the silence hang in the air of the mansion as she walked in, heels tapping crisply on the marble. No staff, no food waiting. The house dimmed, quiet, stripped of its usual curated warmth. Claire took it in with narrowed eyes. "This place feels hollow," she said. "I let the staff go." Her eyes flicked to a framed photograph of Clara still sitting on the hallway table. "You kept the photographs up." "I did not lose everything." A beat of silence. "Then why keep her shrine?" Claire asked. "You need to start letting the past go if you expect someone new to fit." He did not respond. Instead, he led her toward the kitchen where Linda, the nanny, was carefully preparing a bowl of fruit for Adrian, who sat nearby, humming quietly to himself. Claire slowed. "She is still here?" she asked, her voice low. David looked over at Linda, who smiled warmly, her hair loosely tied back, dressed simply in a worn sweater and jeans. She waved. Claire's voice sharpened. "If the staff is gone, why is the nanny still here?" "Could not afford to let her go," David said casually. "She stayed even when she knew I could not pay her." Claire did not reply. Instead, she turned back to him and lowered her voice. "She is blurring lines." David raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Claire did not answer the question. Instead, she pivoted. "When you are ready to rebuild, let me know. I will send over a prenup template, just in case you get sentimental later." She did not stay for dinner. That night, David stood by the fire, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Linda walked in quietly, carrying Adrian, half asleep from a bedtime story. She smiled softly. "I think he wants you to finish the last page." David looked down at his son and took him gently from her arms. The boy's head nestled into his chest, warm and small. Linda turned to leave, but paused. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not mean to overhear, but she does not seem to care much about the people in this house." David looked at her, really looked at her. There was no agenda in her voice, no angle, just concern. The contrast hit him harder than he expected. After Linda left, he sat down beside the fire, his son breathing quietly against him, and stared into the flames. Claire had offered him a plan, a path, a future shaped by efficiency. But not love, not Adrian, not him. Strike 3. But David did not feel anger or betrayal anymore. He felt something worse, emptiness. The rain came quietly, a soft tapping against the windows of the Walker estate like fingers tracing memory on glass. The house, now mostly empty of its former staff, echoed with its own silence. Every room felt wider, lonelier. David stood in the kitchen barefoot, sleeves rolled up, staring into a mug of untouched coffee. The third woman had failed. Clare Wilson, the poised and polished legal titan who saw love as a ledger and relationships as leverage. She had offered him a contract before she offered a hand. 3 women, 3 different kinds of ambition, and none had stayed. David exhaled through his nose, long and tired. He did not feel vindicated anymore, just hollow. He heard light footsteps behind him and turned to see Linda standing in the doorway, holding a laundry basket against her hip. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, a smudge of flour dusted one cheek. Her sweater had a hole at the wrist. She looked utterly ordinary and utterly grounding. "Oh," she said, her eyes flicking to his untouched mug. "You were up early, did not really sleep." She walked past him, opening a cabinet with quiet familiarity. "You do this when you are overthinking. Wander the house at odd hours. Forget to drink the coffee you made." David blinked. "I do." She nodded. Every time something is wrong. He did not respond. She did not push. Instead, she moved through the kitchen like she belonged there. She pulled out a pan, cracked 2 eggs, dropped toast in the old toaster that groaned a little more each week. "You do not have to cook for me," David said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. "I am not cooking for you," she replied without looking up. "I am cooking because Adrian wakes up in 20 minutes, and he will not eat if I do not start now." A silence settled again, but it was different. Not strained, but comfortable, like an old song with no lyrics, just rhythm. David watched her crack the second egg. "Why have you not left?" She glanced over her shoulder. "Left where? This house? This job? Me?" He paused, then added, "I cannot pay you anymore. You know that." Linda did not stop. She flipped the eggs, adjusted the heat. "I am not here for a paycheck," she said. "I never was." David's throat tightened, but he said nothing. She plated the eggs and toast and set them on the table, then poured him a fresh cup of coffee. "I know you are testing people," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. David stilled. "What makes you think that?" She gave a small, dry smile. "Because I have seen you watch them, the women. You are not present when you are with them. You are studying them, waiting for them to reveal something." He did not deny it. "I never meant for you to be part of that," he said. "I know," she said. She looked up, finally meeting his gaze. "But I see more than you think I do, David. I see the way you check out emotionally when someone says the wrong thing. I see the way you smile with your mouth, but not your eyes. I see the loneliness in your silence." David felt a flicker of something deep in his chest. Shame? Relief? He was not sure. "And yet," he said, "you stayed." Linda shrugged. "Adrian needs me. And what about me?" That stopped her. The air between them shifted. "You are different," she said after a moment, harder to help. "You push people away before they can leave on their own." He swallowed. "Is that what you think I am doing now?" She did not answer. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice gentler now. "You do not need a woman who fits into your world. You need someone who is already living in it." His breath caught in his chest. "I am not a solution," she continued. "I am not a project, but I love your son like he is my own. And somewhere along the way, I started seeing you too." Her confession hung in the air like fog, thick and intimate. David looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the creases at the corners of her eyes from years of laughter with Adrian. He saw the resilience in her posture, the quiet, unyielding strength of a woman who had no spotlight, no status, but had more heart than anyone he had tested. "You were never supposed to be part of this," he said again, softer this time. "I did not even see you." "I know," she said. "But I saw you even when you were pretending to be someone else." Later that afternoon, David sat on the back patio watching Adrian chase bubbles in the garden. Linda sat beside him sipping lemonade, her bare feet curled under her. "You know," David said, his voice distant, "I used to think loyalty was measured by how much someone said they cared. And now?" Linda asked. He watched his son laugh wild and free. "Now I think it is in who shows up when you are not worth impressing anymore." Linda did not say anything. She did not need to. Her hand slid over his, tentative but firm. He did not pull away. That evening, long after Adrian had gone to bed, David sat alone in his study. He looked over the photographs on his shelves. Clara, Adrian as a baby, himself at public appearances. He picked up a frame, a picture of him and Clara from their honeymoon, her hair whipped by the wind, his hand on her belly. He whispered her name. "I think I am falling in love again, and I do not know if that is okay." There was no answer, just the quiet hum of the night. But something in him eased, just a little, because this time he was not falling for a headline. He was falling for the woman who never asked to be noticed and stayed anyway. The chandelier in the Walker Estate's grand dining hall had not been lit in over 2 months. Dust gathered on the crystal teardrops. The long mahogany table was now dressed in stark white linen, simple candlelight flickering. David had asked the few remaining staff to leave early. Tonight was not about elegance, it was about exposure. 3 chairs stood on one side of the table. Serena, Natalyia, Clare, each invited under the same pretense. I would like to see you. There is something I need to say in person. Each invitation had been accepted within minutes. A single chair in a quieter corner was for Linda. She did not know why she had been invited. She had not asked. When he had approached her that morning, saying only, "Will you come tonight?" she simply nodded. It was almost cruel to bring her into the same room, but she deserved to see the end of this game. Serena was the first to arrive in a sleek black dress, her lips crimson, her hair in calculated waves. She smiled as though they had never stopped seeing each other. "I knew you would come around," she said lightly. David just gestured to her seat. Natalyia arrived next, filming the chandelier. "Oh my goodness, this lighting is divine," she exclaimed. "This feels very redemption arc." She laughed at her own joke. David did not. Clare was last, punctual, impeccably dressed in a navy pantsuit, diamond studs matching the glint in her eyes. "Whatever this is," she said, placing a folder on the table, "I assume it is important. I rearranged court preparation for it." "It is," David replied. Linda slipped in quietly a few minutes later. She wore a pale blue dress, modest and soft, looking out of place beside the sharper fashion. She went to her corner seat and folded her hands in her lap, silent. 3 women faced David like a panel. He stood at the head of the table. "I want to thank all of you for coming," he began. "You have each played a role in my life these past few months, in very different ways." Serena smiled. Natalyia angled her phone to record audio. Clare clicked her pen. David continued, "I invited you here tonight to tell the truth. Not just about myself, but about you." He pulled out 3 white envelopes, placing one in front of each woman, each containing documented observations. 3 months ago, he said, I initiated a test. I created the illusion of financial ruin. I let the world believe my company was on the brink of collapse. Everything was carefully orchestrated. The silence was thick. Serena's mouth parted. Natalyia lowered her phone. Clare's pen paused. "I needed to know," David continued. "Who would stay if I had nothing left? Who would love me? Not the empire, not the image, but me." He looked directly at Serena. "You disappeared the moment I stopped being convenient. You ignored my messages, then resurfaced when my name became a fleeting public interest again." Her smile faltered. "That is not fair. It is accurate." Then his eyes turned to Natalyia. "You offered support, but only in exchange for attention. Every gesture was a performance. Every moment became content. You did not see a man in pain. You saw a marketable moment." Natalyia scoffed. "Oh, please. Everyone monetizes pain now. I was trying to build something for both of us." "Something for you," David corrected. "And you were building it on my ashes." And finally to Clare. "You saw my vulnerability as a liability. You proposed a merger, not a relationship. A contract, not compassion." Clare did not flinch. It was a pragmatic solution. "You need structure to rebuild. I needed someone, Clare, not a strategist." He let the words hang. Then he stepped back and turned toward Linda. "She never knew there was a test," he said softly. "I never intended to involve her. But she was the only one who stayed, who worked without pay, who checked in, who cared." Linda blinked, startled. She never spoke about it publicly, never asked for anything. She just showed up every day for Adrian, for me, even when I was at my lowest. The other women looked at Linda. Serena with disbelief, Natalyia with disdain, Clare with cold calculation. Linda flushed but did not shrink. "She is the only one who did not see an opportunity in my collapse," David said. "She saw a person." He stepped toward her. "I did not see her for a long time. Not really. I was too busy protecting myself from people like you." He turned back to the others. "I am not angry," he said. "I am just done." The words landed like a gavel. Serena rose first, her eyes narrowed. "Good luck with the maid," she muttered, snatching her envelope and leaving. Natalyia followed, whispering, "You are lost, David. seriously. Claire stood last, her folder untouched. You will regret choosing emotion over strategy, she said coolly. Love does not protect assets. No, David said, meeting her gaze. But it protects people, and I think I have finally remembered which matters more. And then she too was gone. The room fell silent. Linda sat motionless, her eyes wide, her lips parted slightly. She began, but words failed her. David stepped in front of Linda and lowered himself to one knee. This was not something he had planned, uncalculated and unscripted, just instinct. I hurt you by not seeing you sooner, by lumping you in with them, he said softly. But Linda, I think I have been falling in love with you for a while now. I just did not realize it until tonight. She looked at him, truly looked, and all the nights she had held space for him, all the times she had put Adrian first, all the ways she had been invisible in the shadow of his grief, it came rushing back. You do not have to say anything, he added quickly. Not tonight, but I needed you to know. No more masks, no more tests, just the truth. Linda took a breath. Then, without words, she reached out, took his hand, and pulled him gently to sit beside her. In the quiet that followed, David Walker, for the first time in years, felt whole, not because someone wanted him, but because someone had seen him and stayed anyway. The air in the garden was heavy with the scent of lavender and late-blooming roses. Sunlight filtered through the canopy of trees, soft and gold, casting shadows across the cobblestone path through the Walker estate's private grounds. It was a quiet afternoon, and the world outside the iron gates felt very far away. David Walker sat on the garden bench with Adrian in his lap, one small hand curled around his father's finger, the other holding a dandelion puff like treasure. The boy had grown fast in the past year, taller, more curious, louder, but his eyes still held the same depth as his mother's. Across the garden, Linda knelt beside a flower bed, her hands buried in the soil as she repotted some wild lavender. The breeze tugged at her hair. She tucked strands behind her ear absently, smiling to herself as Adrian called out, "Miss Linda, come see my magic trick." She looked up and grinned. "Is it the disappearing cookie one again?" "No, this time I can make a dandelion turn into stars." David chuckled. "He has been working on that all morning." "I know," Linda said, standing and dusting her hands. "He made me promise not to blink." As she walked toward them, David found his heart tightening in a way it had not in years, not with fear or grief, but with a weightless wonder, a sense of having arrived after years of wandering through fog. She sat beside them on the bench, and Adrian proudly blew the dandelion puff into the air, sending the seeds into the wind. "See, stars," Linda clapped gently. "You are a magician and a gardener." Adrian nodded sagely, then leaned into David's chest. Moments later, he was asleep. David brushed his fingers over his son's hair, then looked at Linda. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" she asked, eyes on the sky. "For staying? For being the one who did not turn away?" She turned her gaze to him, expression unreadable. "I was not trying to be different." "I know," he said. "That is what made you different." They sat in silence for a while. Just wind, breath, and the sound of distant birds. Eventually, Linda broke it. "So, what happens now?" David looked down at his sleeping son. "Now," he said, "we stop pretending we are just passing through each other's lives." He turned to her fully. "I do not want you to be the woman who helped me survive. I want you to be the woman I build something with, something real. No more shadows, no more pretending we are just friends." Her eyes shimmered. "David, I am not asking you to give up who you are," he said quickly. "I know what that is like, being asked to fit into someone else's world. I do not want that. I want to build a new one with you around Adrian, around honesty." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "And Clara?" He nodded slowly. "I will always love her, but she is not the ending. She was the beginning. And I think she would want me to find love again with someone who did not just love me but loved him." He looked down at Adrian. Linda did too, then rested her hand over David's. "I have loved him since he took his first steps toward me. And you? I think I have been loving you through all your silence, waiting for you to look at me and finally see me." "I see you now," David said, his voice low. "All of you." 3 months later, the garden looked very different. White chairs lined the path. Strings of lights hung from the trees, gently swaying in the breeze. It was not a grand wedding. No celebrity presence, no orchestras, no gold-trimmed invitations, just close friends, family, and the soft murmur of nature bearing witness. Linda stood beneath the archway in a simple ivory dress, her hair loose, a ring of tiny white flowers resting against her curls. David stood opposite her, a gentle calm in his chest, unlike any he had ever known. Adrian stood between them, holding both their hands. The officiant's voice faded into the background as David looked at Linda. Not as the nanny, not as the woman who stayed, but as the woman who had rewritten the ending of his story. She did not complete him. She simply reminded him he had never been broken to begin with. When the vows were spoken and the kiss finally came, there were no tears, just quiet smiles. Peace, a new beginning, one built not on wealth or strategy or expectations, but on a moment in a storm when one woman chose to stay and never asked for anything in return. A year later, a new photograph sat on the hallway table of the Walker home. Not of Clara alone anymore, but of David, Linda, and Adrian at the beach. Adrian was mid-laugh, his hair wild in the wind. Linda had sand on her knees. David had his arms around them both. Next to it still stood Clara's wedding photograph, but it no longer felt like a shrine. It felt like the root of a tree that had grown into something living, something real. And above it all, David finally understood. Love is not about who comes when you are winning. It is about who stays when there is nothing left to offer and never asks you to be anyone but yourself.